Don't raise the expectations too much. Give me something low to shoot for, okay?
So anyway, you're probably not going to like this guy, but...
There you go. Much better.
That's what he plays.
You're on, sir.
How you guys doing? I'm Greg Jones, and I'm going to be talking, my notes, there they are, about, called the title, Hearing the World Through the Sound of Music. I know that sounds like I'm going to be talking about The Hills Are Alive, but I should have changed the title because it's not about that. I got some handouts I thought I'd just pass out. Right now I got 15 of these, so I don't know how many people I'm looking at, but probably about right. Got 3 sets of handouts to get started. Pass this starting here. And I'll reference this stuff a little later. But basically, the subject matter I'll be discussing, there's another one. Subject matter I'll be discussing is kind of looking at the world or looking at life philosophically, even metaphysically, spiritually, through music. Maybe trying to give a perspective from a musician's perspective, a musician's standpoint, looking a little bit under the hood of music, to draw some insights that I see that would that we could be informed about life itself, really. And one thing that keeps people entertained is I brought my guitar, and I brought an amp, and when things start to get old, I'll play a little bit. And actually, what I'll do is demonstrate some things I would talk about. Good, I got some sound. I'll demonstrate some things that I would talk about on the guitar, just to keep things going. Tell you a little bit about me as we begin. I am a computer geek by trade, and I work with Dan. Don't hold that against me. And thank you, I appreciate that. You must know Dan. Oh, another Dan. Wow, Dan squared. What do we do with that? When do twin powers activate and form of, right? And they're both wearing green, too. I don't have a degree in music. I play music, though, because this is my DNA. Play about 7 instruments. I've been a worship leader / church music director for about 8 years in various churches. I teach at McCutcheon Music in Centerville, primarily guitar. It's my obsession. It's the instrument I still practice, and the rest I just play for fun. And I used to teach at Cedarville as an adjunct for about 1.5 years. Don't ask me how they let me in there, but they did, and that was fun. Recorded some music. It's like I'm a bivocationalist, so the music thing is a second income, but it's not primarily because of income I do it. Right now, I'm not a music director at any particular church, but I am a hired gun guitarist for Ginsburg Church out in Tip City. So they keep me busy about 2 to 4 times a month. Really neat church, a lot of fun out there. So that kind of gives you a perspective of where I'm coming from. I'm coming from a Christian bias. I don't really hide, but I won't preach to you. I'm not going to be asking for any donations or leading you in a sinner's prayer or asking you to join my church or anything like that. But I do bring I see a lot of what I see in music, I see in my faith, and I want to share that. And maybe you'll find that augments whatever worldview you're coming from. Maybe you'll find it challenges it. I don't know. So we'll just kind of take it from there and try to have some fun. I'm going to start off with playing a little bit something, and I'm not going to do a lot of singing, but I'm going to sing on this one a little bit. This is a song that I've wrote, and it's just original tune that I thought the lyrics kind of fit, maybe the topic, and just play an abbreviated version of it because I am going to try to watch the clock. In fact, I'll take my watch off. All right, so because we got about an hour, and after the hour, we'll have a Q&A session. I understand you guys might not want to wait till Q&A to ask questions, and that's cool. If I see we're getting short of time, I might stop questions and say I need to move on to the next point and hold that until the Q&A session. So anyhow, okay, I got some sound right here. That's good. So I'm going to show you this little song I wrote, and as I said, I think the lyrics kind of just fit where I'm going. I don't have a mic, but hopefully, it shouldn't be an issue. My wife says I have a big mouth. What that happens to me. The heartache and the pain in this sea of humanity. From the child burned in the fire to the old man's senility. The joy of the bride adorned for her groom. What is this life happens to me, when all that I want is not what I need? What is this life born of all meaning? It's got to be more than this life. What is this life? Deeper than you. What is this life? It's got to be more than this life. What is this life? So you get a little entertainment. I'm not going to charge either for playing stuff for you. So as I look at music, by the way, I guess before I go any further, I brought my amp, guitar, as you can see. I got this little pedal up here I'll use later on. That's pretty neat. And what it does is it records me live while I'm playing. So like it's called a looper pedal. So if I hit something on the chord, and I hit that, and I let go, so it'll play without my any hands. So it'll record me playing live, and sometimes you'll hear two guitars and wonder what's happening, and it's me playing with the pedal. It's entertaining. It's a good way to practice too. As I look at music, I see kind of two elements going on, and one is so obvious, and maybe both of these are obvious to you guys. I mean, I am talking to a Mensa crowd. By the way, I'm following Marshall Grouch's dictum, who said, I would never want to join a club that would be lower standards that would have me as a member. So I never want to speak to a group that would have me as its member. so I'm at the right place today. I don't think I could pass your test myself. But what's that?
Groucho Marx.
Groucho, yeah. Did I say Richard Marx?
No, you said Marshall Grouch.
Did I? That's funny. I had no idea. We'll see what else I screwed up later on. That's funny. I didn't even catch that. So as I look at music, I kind of see like two sides of it. The obvious side is the visceral side, the experiential side. It's the emotion that we all glean from it. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. But the second thing that I think is less obvious to a lot of people is a propositional side to music. And is an analytical side to it. Music has a lot of, it's about systems, really. And as a computer geek, I'm very comfortable with systems. Binary itself undergirds computers, and that's a system. And I wanted to just spend some time showing you, that concept in music. The handouts I gave you, the one that looks like a piano keyboard, if you look at that, what I'm trying to just show you very visually on the piano is that the piano keyboard gives us all the white keys. That's a C major scale. So a C major scale would be, I'm just playing all the white keys on a piano. Obviously on the guitar fretboard, and there's a second octave of the same scale, there's no black and white keys. So a guitarist has to learn where those white keys reside on the fretboard, which is interesting. There's a second handout I gave you with the fretboard. It's pretty ugly, pretty messy handout, you'll see. And that's a guitar fretboard. And what that is that's those white keys on the guitar fretboard itself. And ideally, when I teach guitar students, I'm trying to teach them to learn all those notes all over the fretboard. And I have to do that systematically and one piece of the puzzle at a time. But music, I can form music just by playing those 7 notes, those 7 letters, which we call being in a key signature. So I think maybe I'll just demonstrate that first of all. Probably gonna do more improvisation than anything with the music thing. That's kind of fun. I'm just gonna try to make up something, and I'm only going to play the notes that are from those white keys. I'm not gonna play those black keys, all the sharps and flats. Okay, so I'm just gonna stick within that 7-note system. We'll see if I can make any sense of it and make anything sound good. Okay, so here goes in the key of C major. Could everybody hear the guitar okay, by the way? I didn't want to be too loud for them either. I can really blast them if we wanted to. So, all right, let's see what I can come up with in the key of C major. So. Improvisation, taken straight from 7 notes and nothing else, okay? And so you can see that those 7 notes represent order, a system. That intrigues me as a musician. I think when I was a little boy, I was visualizing the order in music to a degree before I ever even picked up an instrument. I remember visualizing it similarly in terms of going up and down like we do on a score. I remember being 7 years old, and we had a piano in the living room, and that piano keyboard was laid out I thought it was laid out like a mystery. I thought all the keys are random. And one day I learned that those notes are laid out sequentially in a sequence, in an order. And the way they're laid out, of course, is the notes as they go right, they get higher, and as they go left, they get lower. And it's in a linear fashion. As soon as I figured that out, it was like an epiphany, and I started making up little melodies on my own. I couldn't even articulate to ask the question. How are these keys laid out? I didn't have the language as a little kid. I mean, I didn't know what probably didn't know what the word random was, and certainly didn't understand the concept of being linear, or sequential. I had this little epiphany, even though it was very abstract and I couldn't even articulate it. And I sat down, and all of a sudden I started coming up with little melodies, and my parents said, wow, where did this come from? We've got to get them piano lessons. And there was a piano teacher that was in the neighborhood a couple doors down who was very good. I don't believe in coincidences as a person of faith, so I really believe that was a divinely appointed thing in my life. But music has this order that you're seeing. Now, when I teach this to students, many times it just bores them. I got a lot of students that be about you guys' age, and even adults do this. They get You know, you say, okay, I want you to go home and I want you to practice. It's very dry, it's propositional, it's analytical, it's like Spock, you know. I love Spock in Star Trek, but he didn't have a lot of emotion, and it's sterile, you know. So that's an exercise. It sounds like an exercise. They're not interested usually, okay? So you have to find ways to make the propositions come alive. So what I've learned to do, I do this as a guitar teacher, is I try to get them to question the propositions, okay? So taking all those white keys on the piano keyboard or that picture you saw of the guitar fretboard, I give that to them in smaller dosages, by the way. That picture of the fretboard is overwhelming. That's something that an advanced guitarist sees, but initially a student would learn maybe that scale in one little segment of the fretboard and then the next segment, and I put blinders on them like a horse jockey would do a horse to keep them focused. Otherwise you get overwhelmed. But I give them a scale like what you just heard me play, and I say, now I want you to be creative with it. Well, I had one student tell me, I'm not creative, I don't have the gift for that, you know. And it's funny, when I've researched the idea of creativity, you find I found a lot of articles talking about the fruits of creativity, the benefits, but didn't find a lot that tells you how to be creative. I think there's an assumption that we're either born with it or we're not born with it. And I'm sure there's some truth to that, but I believe that you can learn creativity, or you can bring it out. And I believe that the simple way you do it is to learn to ask questions. And there's a specific questioning mindset that I suggest my students have. I tell them to put on their explorer hat. To be like Indiana Jones, put the hat on, get the lasso out, and I want them to explore that system, that scale. And the type of questions that an explorer would ask would be, what can I do with those group of 7 notes? What's the potential for those notes? And explore that and take it to the boundaries and find where those boundaries are, and then try to take it beyond where you think those boundaries are. And for instance, with those 7 notes you're hearing me play, you know, obviously you can play them in order, like you heard me play ascending, and you can play them descending. And then I can also, it's more fun if I can start skipping around on these notes. So instead of playing them sequentially all up in a stair step, I might play the first scale degree, skip the second scale degree, and go to the third. So I'm skipping. I can skip every other note. And that's an arpeggio, by the way. I don't have to know it's an arpeggio. I'm just being creative with my scales. All music boils down to scales ultimately. Even the arpeggios, the intervals, the chord progressions, it's all scales in the end. I also liken this to the metaphor of the game of Scrabble. We all played Scrabble before. You're given 7 letters and you're told form any words you want. And that's what I'm doing with students. I'm saying, here's your 7 notes, form any words you want. So, you know, in addition to being creative with the note order, I can number those notes and think mathematically. I could play groups of 3s ascending. That would be note number 1, note number 2, note number 3. That's 1, 2, 3, and then I'm going to play 2, 3, 4 next. 3, 4, 5, etc. I could play groups of 4s. This is a good way to practice. Sometimes it sounds too much like an exercise for a student also. I understand that. If they're a very basic student, I'll have them do simpler things, like I'll just say, I want you to be creative rhythmically with this and do. And think about, while I'm doing this, I'm stalling. What's my next note? And I might look at the tab, and there it is, my next note. And then I might play it back and go back and forth between those 2 notes. And just really learn those 2 notes. It's really a challenge to tell my students, be creative with 3 notes. Don't be creative with all 7. Take 3 notes and just, like these 3, and try to be real creative with it. Gets old after a while, but if you can be creative with 3 notes, imagine what you can do with all 7 of them, or even all 12, which we have in music, right? So as I can get my students to question those propositions, this stuff, they learn how to be creative, and it becomes alive to them. And all of a sudden, it's not dead and sterile anymore, okay? So when I improvised for you earlier, that's what I was doing. I was asking in my mind, what can I possibly do with these 7 notes and trying those things out. I might even think in terms, of the direction. I can play my notes ascending for a while, and then I can stop and change direction either abruptly. I could jump, several notes down and then go up. And what that sounds like, again, I might I'll just play some lines that change direction for you, just so you can hear, So that just gives you a sampling of that, okay? So the creative process is the embrace, I would argue, is the embrace of questioning. And that's what open-minded people do, right? They're supposed to ask questions, and I believe that births that creative process. So if I just do that, my music's going to sound random, or it can sound a little methodical. So it helps if I add rhythm to the picture. You can see I just tapping my foot as I plan and thinking rhythmically. Thinking in terms of being creative. Rhythm is ordering music over time. Edgar Varese, by the way, said that music is organized sound. And that's what we're exploring here. We're exploring the order in music. So I can order it over a time scale, and I have this pulse going. By the way, computers do this. They have a clock source. If you go on the internet and you have 2 or more computers that talk to each other, they establish a clock source, a beat. They negotiate how fast they can communicate. And once they determine that, it's hard to tell which computer's which. It's hard to tell what's the client and what's the server. It's hard to determine if you're downloading, uploading, or just writing locally to your hard drive. You get ultimate unity. I hear that one of the most difficult questions of philosophy is how to reconcile unity with diversity. I guess the word university comes from that concept, or e pluribus unum, on our dollars, is out of the many one. So rhythm seems to give us this insight into unity that I think is fascinating. So as I think rhythmically and try to be creative with my note placement over time, that might sound like something like, there's a little space I'm purposely leaving in, I'm really inserting space as much as I'm inserting notes. Again, right now I'm sticking to C major. I'm not even playing those black keys, which we can do, and music does that. Music will deviate from that 7-note simple system. I'm not going deeply into that because I'm trying to keep it a little simple, but jazz does it very well and blues does it as well. So being creative with music, as it passes over time, I'm questioning the propositions. And I believe that in life we have a set of propositions. The Greeks called it logos. And I guess it goes back to Heraclitus. Am I pronouncing that right? Because I already screwed up Groucho Marx's name. It's either Heraclitus or the guy who said that you never step in the same river twice. What's
Heraclitus.
that? Heraclitus. Thank you. Anyhow, he I understand the idea of logos was this order that permeates all life. And Aristotle also used it in a sense to just talk about discourse and logic. Obviously, you can see linguistically how we get this idea of logic from the word logos. So to me, I see that in music with music theory. I don't know if I've used that term enough here yet, but that's what I'm really kind of talking about. I gave you a third handout. Oh, that's this. In fact, I should have given you a fourth one now I think about it. The circle is there, but there was another one I was thinking of. I forgot. It's right here. I'll get to the circle later. Let me pass this one out. This handout that he's passing out, I should wait till you guys all get it, really. I can take those 7 notes, and you don't have to be a piano player to do this. And I can put those 7 notes together in different creative combinations and start to come up with stuff that sounds music-like, By the way, how many of you are musicians? Because you guys are musicians. You said you're kind of a musician. You're a musician? Cool.
Guitar, so I'm watching your fingers shake.
Cool. So yeah, we got a few musicians in the house. I figured we would. I'm sure the World War II guy is fascinating, though. I'd like to hear him myself. Hopefully I can do some justice over here, though. That chart that we're looking at shows if you were to take the 7 white keys on the piano and group them in threes, and you were to build chords and get harmony, you'd get this little pattern. Like if I build my first chord on the C note, because I'm in the key of C major, so C is my first scale degree. I'm going to call this the 1 chord. Makes sense, right? And that chord is going to be major, okay? It's going to have this major sound. Just skipping white keys, I'm ignoring the black keys on the piano, and it sounds like that, okay? I can then go on to the 2 chord, which says it's D, and that's minor, okay? So that's going to be sounding like this. I'm actually playing minor 7. Since you're watching my hands, I got to be careful, right? So there's the D minor. And then the 3rd chord is E minor, although I play a lot of times a C chord with the E bass. There's a straight E minor. The C over E sounds similar. A little different. I hear that more in pop music than I hear the E minor in that context. The 4 chord is F major. The 5's major, that's G. The 6 is minor, that's A. The 7 people teach it. If any of you, for you musicians, they teach this to be a diminished. Nobody plays it diminished. It's theory. But it's not practical. I never hear that in that context. What you hear instead in 90% of music is they'll take a 5 chord, which is the G, and they'll play a B bass, okay? If that's over some of your heads, and I know I'm working with a smart group here, I don't care about you getting those details. The point is I want to show you that even chords have conformed to this system. And I find that very fascinating. Again, I suspect that all of life is maybe like, there's been all these paradigms that I understand throughout history that people have looked at life, like from Aristotle, I understand that we looked at life like an organism, and Aristotle was very good with biology. And then I understand later on that people started to look at it, at the world more like a machine through Newton. And that's kind of got displaced also, and especially with quantum theory, which I'm no expert on, don't ask me questions on quantum theory. Over my head, over my pay grade, but they don't really have a clear analogy on the world anymore. But I suspect there's information in the world, and maybe this is just me being tainted by my computer geek vocation. But I think there's propositions in the world, in life. There's an underlying logos that is like these systems we're looking at. And we discover them every day, and well, not every day, but we discover them in science that gives us all the technology that we get to enjoy. Technology authenticates science. And so I just believe in that logos that permeates all of life. And I know that's I sound like I'm a navel gazer right now. But we're seeing that rational order within music. There's 12 notes in music, actually. I've been concentrating on the 7. I could play those other 5 also. That's when we start to get into jazz and blues. I'm not going to really get deeply into that unless some of you really want to hear it, but you've all heard those styles before. When it comes to what I'm drawing out of this stuff with, well, let me say this about creativity. I told you that I try to teach my students creativity by getting them to ask questions. I see a parallel with the questioning process and faith, because I know a lot of religious people are dogmatic, and that gets people killed as they strap on bomb vests and do horrible things. It's awful. But faith is the embrace of ambiguity, and it's the embrace of mystery. It's to ask questions. I see faith as something that's supposed to be thought-provoking. I see in my own faith as a Christian that Jesus, he'd be confronted with people, sometimes they're antagonists, sometimes they're protagonists, but no matter which side, they would ask him a question, and he would, instead of giving them an answer, he would give them a question back. And a lot of times he was doing that, I believe, because he was trying to provoke people and inspire them to think and to get them to open their minds. You don't see that a lot in modern Christianity or modern religion, and I lament that. As a Christian, I apologize to any of you who are non-Christians that even happens. And I would like to be the little guy in the pond that helps affect some type of change within the church there. That gets the church embracing enough ambiguity to at least ask the deeper questions of life, because I see that Christ did that. And creativity does that with those propositions. So I see I see creativity as mirrored in faith. And I see, just as I tied creativity to an object, the scales, the systems, the music theory, Christianity does the same thing, and this fascinates me too. I'm like, is it a coincidence? Because as I told you, I don't really believe in coincidences. In Romans 10:17, the Apostle Paul says, faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the word of God. It's that Greek logos thing again, okay? And he's saying that faith is tied to an object. Because if I tell my musician students, be creative, and I don't give them those tools, the scales, the intervals, the arpeggios, and the chords, and understanding what a key is, it's very, very difficult. It's so abstract, it's fuzzy. They don't know what to do. I got to give them a tool. You can be a really skilled architect or a builder, but if you only have a hammer and nail, you're not going to be as effective as you would if you had a whole set of craftsman tools. So I try to give them those craftsman tools and then equip them to be creative so that they can make some magic out of the music. And where I said, faith is tied to the word and creativity is tied to the propositions. If I just play the propositions, if I just play the order and I'm not creative, it's so sterile. It just doesn't have any life to it. But if I question the notes, that's when I might be able to get big difference. We can all hear that, right? So good, you're alive. I'm making sure I'm alive too there. So music will just do that to you. And Christianity says the same thing in my mind. I come to you guys with biases, and I admit that up front, and I hope that gives you some allowances if you're not coming from the perspective I am here. But I come to you with my Christian biases. John chapter 1 says that Jesus became flesh. It says that in the beginning was the Word, and the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. And it calls Jesus the Word. So Jesus is the Logos, okay? But that Logos was kind of dead, especially if you see it in the Old Testament where they had 613 commandments, and they tried to follow them very, very legalistically, and it was all about what you did and what you didn't do, and God would slap you down. But in John, you see that the Word became alive, and it dwelled among us, is what it says. And in music, I see that as a picture of that Christian truth, in that I'm taking those propositions, the logos, and making them come alive by questioning them and embracing the ambiguity that one can only embrace if one has faith. Say this about faith. I believe that faith is moderation of belief. It is to believe in something with enough to not be a skeptic and to disbelieve in everything, right? You're not the ultimate skeptic. At the same time, you're not so dogmatic that you're certain, I see it, if you look at a continuum and you see ultimate doubt here and ultimate belief here, I see it, or ultimate certainty maybe I should say, I see faith as moderation and somewhere in the middle. And so that's what I mean when I talk about faith. And I see logic and reason as necessitating faith. Because, we ask the philosophical question, if a tree falls in the forest and no one's around, do we hear a sound? Well, the presupposition is that a tree could even fall in the forest without anyone being around. If that's true, then that means that there's limits to empiricism. That means there are things that happen outside of our ability to sense or to see and to observe and to test. We're already admitting that there's a world outside of our little perceptions. So right away, I'm already into the realm that believe that there are some things that exist that I can't see and I can't prove. Okay? Now, what we need to act, you need to act in a discerning way to determine what those things are. Look at my notes. When I improvise these notes of music, and I question those notes, one thing I'm trying to do is to experience the notes. When I say experiencing them, as I play each one, you can hear that those notes are either giving us consonance or dissonance. They're either giving me tension or release. That's a resting note. It's the most restful note in the key of C, which is what I've been playing in exclusively in front of you guys. Now I'm building a little tension, a little more maybe. And that's probably the most, I think of it as the most tense note. And it comes back to rest. You kind of just feel the music go up and down. It's probably easier to hear this if I play those chords in that system I gave you. Like the 1 chord is very much at rest. Everything lands there, okay? Contrast that to the 5 chord, which is the G. And it wants to resolve. It's begging me to resolve it to that C chord. It pulls, okay? So there's a natural tension and release in music, and I see that in the ebb and flow of life. And when I'm improvising, I'm trying to be conscious of that. If I only have my students question the scales, it's going to sound like a run-on sentence. Let me try to demonstrate the run-on sentence. It'll be, I'm going to be really rhythmically stiff here because it helps augment my point, but they might be doing something like, and this is the way I practice a lot of times, I'm just going to take the notes and randomly play them, okay? But I'm going to stick within the 7 notes I gave you, okay? I'm talking about. I said I was going to try to be random, but my fingers are naturally falling to certain patterns that they like. So it's hard for me to be random probably at that speed. Maybe if I slow down a little bit, I can be more random, and you can see. I'm just playing white keys, okay? This is a great way to practice guitar, but it'll drive your spouse crazy. It's not very moving, though, is it? But I'm still within the system. But I'm missing something. I'm not telling a story. My playing is not yet conversational. And when I think conversational, and I think of that tension and that release, I'm thinking of trying to play like a story, okay? And every good story sets out a foundation and introduces you to the characters and the plots and the settings, and then it builds up a tension, and then you have the final battle, and Darth says, "I'm your father," and then you. I'm sorry, did I give away the plot? And you got younger folks who probably haven't seen Empire Strikes Back yet. And by the way, The Empire Strikes Back. And then The Jedi Returns. And then finally, you have the final battle scene, and then everybody wins, and we all go home, and we're happy because of the Hollywood ending, right? So if you can make your music with that consciousness of the tension, the consonants, to make it say something, it's more interesting. So I'll try to do that now, and we can see that's going to sound a little more like a song. Before I do, I'm also going to play thematically now. And what that means, and I was already doing it sometimes by accident, is I'm going to repeat certain motifs, certain things that just grab my ear, hopefully grab your ear, and are interesting. And I'll repeat them, sometimes dead on, sometimes I'll vary them to try to build a theme, because life is thematic. Good stories are thematic, all right? So let's see if I can do that. That's going to be, I'll stick within the white keys again. That's a theme I'm doing right there with this little part. landed the airplane, right? Because we like landings, happy endings. So I got to be conscious of the story. And it's interesting to me in my faith that I used to wonder as an analytical mind why the Bible wasn't set out in terms of do this, don't do that, and actually a lot of the Old Testament law stuff is, but why it wasn't written more like a lawyer would write an opinion, for instance, or a philosopher might write a lot of books more propositionally and analytically. And then as I got older, I started to realize the power of narrative and the power of story, and how stories are transcendent in that they reach everybody. For instance, when I was a little kid, I was mentioning Star Wars. It's 1978 or 7, I think, is when the first one came out. I was in kindergarten. And that was my first exposure to Eastern philosophy, because there is some of that I understand in Star Wars. And I would never have picked up on that just by reading a book. I picked up on it because it was embedded within a story. And we do that in fairy tales, for instance, as little children, where we get a lot of our values, from those stories. So I think it's important that we tell stories, and maybe ask what kind of stories are we telling our kids today. And when you look at what's on cable TV, there's a reason to be concerned and say maybe the world's going to hell in a handbasket and there aren't enough handbaskets to go around. But so I'm trying to tell a story. I'm trying to make my playing like a conversation. And in a good conversation, you have somebody comes up and says, "Hey, Joe, how you doing?" This guy's got a lot of character, okay? He's like the guy with the shades on and stuff, maybe the heavy bling. And Joe says, "Oh, man, I'm just really sad." And Joe, man, he just changes his whole countenance now. He says, "Man, dude, what is wrong?" Right? Etc. You can hear the conversational element and how one phrase is related to the other phrase. So music does that, and I think life does that. We do that. You guys are doing that this weekend as you relate to one another and you enjoy each other's fellowship, playing the games. I've enjoyed talking to those of you guys I've met already here. I've only been here about an hour. But good times, and that's just a property that I see in music. St. Augustine talked about this idea of the God-shaped whole, where he said that he said we have this longing that he believed can only be filled by God and nothing less. Elvis Presley, who had millions of dollars, fame, fortune, good looks, and talent, he had it all. Yet the guy wasn't happy, as you can see by how his life ended. And his brother gave us a lot of insight into that as well. Michael Jackson's life seemed in many ways to mirror that. We are more than just material things. We are more than fame and fortune, and yet our culture tries to sell us all those things and tries to reduce us to those things. I love capitalism, but it kind of it reduces us many times, or tries to reduce us down to being a target demographic of consumers trying to buy things. It looks at us like numbers, like zeros and ones. And if all we have in life, like the song I did at the opener, what is this life? Void of all meaning. Has got to be more than this life. If all that we have in life is what we do as a vocation, or what we have and what we possess materially, big deal. There's got to be something deeper and greater, and I believe in that. I agree with St. Augustine there. Where I see that in music gets into the visceral side of music. I said the visceral side is obvious. I mean, I don't have to say much about it. It's hard to analyze anyhow when you just, you hear that beautiful violin or piano or whatever, and it just moves you to either want to turn it off or to, just to saturate your soul in the music because we enjoy it. There's a visceral side that is human, that we all just enjoy and experience music. That visceral nature of music, that aesthetic nature of art, that beauty, I believe, points to truth. I've just kind of come to this conclusion recently, but I believe that it's more important to pursue beauty than to pursue truth. It's easier for me to. It's harder for me to prove, like my faith is true. There's arguments to be made. There's Christian apologists. I mentioned Augustine, and I'm thinking of G.K. Chesterton, who's one of my favorites, and C.S. Lewis, and these guys make brilliant arguments, and there's modern guys like Ravi Zacharias, who has a ministry called Let My People Think, and he goes and speaks at the Harvard Veritas forums, and he makes these profound arguments for faith, which is an anathema to a lot of people who look at faith as being totally like throw your brain out. And I appreciate all that, and I've dove really deep into all that, okay? But at the same time, when it comes down to the end, I've realized you can make a strong argument for anything. A great example, Euclidean geometry got torn down in the 1500s, I believe. It was one time in mathematics seen as like the system that it was the model for the rest of science to follow. They tried, as physics today still tries to find a theory of everything. Euclidean geometry seemed to explain everything mathematically, and then it got torn down by non-Euclidean geometry, which is just as rational, just as logical, and is true within some contexts, but that doesn't mean it's true within every context, you know. You can be, you know, I tell my wife sometimes I win the argument not because I'm right, but because I'm the better arguer. Sometimes she's right, and I just don't know it. And that's too bad for me, and I need to make sure she doesn't hear that on my little recorder today. I'll edit that part out. But it's easier for me to speak of, not in terms of what is true, but in terms of what is healthy. It's interesting to me that when I look at Jesus and his first sermon, because you'd think that the most important thing you want to say, you'd say first. You know, if you're God incarnate and you came down to earth and you had a message. The first thing we believe he said, if the Sermon on the Mount is his first sermon, and most Christians believe that is, he starts off with blessed. He's got this theme, by the way. You heard the theme in my improv. His theme is blessed. Blessed. I sound like Shakespeare when I say it that way. I could say blessed, but I like saying blessed. Just like I'd like to say Macho Grouch. He kept saying, blessed are those who are poor in spirit. Blessed are those who are meek. Blessed are the humble. Blessed are those who are hunger and thirst for righteousness, and they will be filled. My favorite is blessed are those who are pure in heart, they will see God, because I believe that's objectivity. Because I believe that objectivity doesn't mean you have no opinion. It means you love God so much that you love truth, because God is truth. So you love truth so much that you're willing to give up your arguments. It means you're willing to lose the argument. It means you're willing to give up your little security blanket belief, whatever that is, if you find this real truth that is worth holding on to. You hold on to it at all costs. And Jesus is saying that he appeals to blessing, which is very fascinating to me. I mentioned G.K. Chesterton. My favorite book is Orthodoxy. And in that book somewhere he talks about this idea, and he talks about the lunatic. He says people who are in lunatic asylums believe in themselves. Our culture tells us believe in yourself. And I understand why they do that, because of self-esteem. But you can take that really, really, really too far. He says people who believe in themselves are in the insane asylum, which in his day in the UK, I think he calls it Hanwell, I think was the place that was local to him. He says they're perfectly rational. We think they've lost their heads, but in truth, they've lost everything else except their heads. They're very rational. He talks about the paranoid person and says that the paranoid person, you walk up to them and say, we're not out to get you. And they say, well, that's exactly what I would expect you to say if you were out to get me. They're logical. The problem is not that they've lost their logic, they lost everything else except logic. He says, he draws their little paradigm, it's a small circle. And he says the problem is that not that it's not round and not that it's not coherent, but it's too small. Their world's too small. He says, what a small world you must believe in if you think that you're the king of England, in your psychotic moments. He says, what a small kingdom that must be. I got firsthand experience of this. I got a relative who thinks he's on The Truman Show. Anybody ever seen that movie? The Truman Show is a movie where it's a good movie to rent. The character is on a TV show and he doesn't know it. And all of his life is a stage. It's all set up like, he's behind, there's hidden cameras and the whole world's watching him. He has no idea. And towards as the movie progresses, he starts to find out that he's really on a stage, and he has to make a decision if he wants to live in this fake reality or if he wants to live in the real world. So my friend thinks that he's on the Truman Show and that there's a government conspiracy, and all you guys and me, we all watch him on TV all the time. I've told him we're not really doing that, but that's exactly what he'd expect me to say, right? He's logical, but his world is really, really, really small. But the thing I can say is his belief leads to unhealth. It's not healthy. And the proof of that is he was a brilliant kid. He got a college degree. He wears these headphones because he can't take noise. Like this noise out there would just distract him. He hears messages, he says. He can't listen to TV, music, because he gets these messages all the time. And it's because he's not in a healthy state. He can't get a job, although he wants a job. That's an extreme example. But my point is that while it's harder for me, I'm not going to be as dogmatic on truth like a lot of Christians might be, or a lot of people who come from whatever religious or philosophical background is. But I think that when you find truth and you live it out, it'll lead you to health. Doesn't mean that I never will get sick with cancer or whatever. It doesn't mean that no problems ever happen. It just means you optimize your life and put it on the best track possible. And I see that in a lot of presuppositions that Christianity brings. For instance, it says that we live in a broken world. And out of that idea of a broken world and that human nature is flawed, that's the best argument for checks and balance system that we have. In fact, I think Federalist Paper 51, the writer says that if men could be governed by angels, or if men were angels, we would not need the check and balance system. But because neither is true, we need it. Well, it tends to work because, you can get caught with your hand in the cookie jar, and it's easy to live your life however you want when no one's looking. And integrity is living your life when no one is looking, but there's always someone looking when you believe in God. So that's one reason why that I also believe that it's healthy to have a worldview that includes God in the picture. So in music, you're trying to make it beautiful. You're trying to make it move people, and I'm suggesting that beauty points to the truth. Okay, because there's a chicken and egg question that we ask. They say, okay, which came first? Did the chicken or the egg come first? Okay, and the Greek philosophers were asking the same questions. They were saying, now if I can get my mathematics right and make it all beautiful in proportion, does that create beauty? Or does beauty create this beautiful mathematics we see, like in, I think it's called the Fibonacci number series? You guys ever heard of that? That it's a number pattern that's all over nature. It's found in music. 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, and 13 dominate music. I know we think of 12 notes in music, but the 13th note's the new octave. And then there's 8 notes in the scale in an octave. And then there's the first, third, and fifth are the notes in a basic chord. So you see a lot of those numbers in music, and it's way beyond music. Life is ordered. It's that logos thing I'm talking about, okay? So, but the Greek philosophers were asking, which comes first, the chicken or the egg? Is it the mathematics that creates the beauty, or the beauty that creates the math? And my suggestion, and I'm seeing this as a musician by demonstrating it, I can be oblivious to all these systems, these handouts I've given you. I can be oblivious to the white keys and what they look like on the piano. I can be oblivious to the scales, the intervals, the arpeggios, and all the music theory. I know fantastic musicians who don't know a lick of music theory. They can play chords, and they cannot tell you what this is. It's a C major 9. They have no idea, but they know where to put their fingers to get it to sound good. They're what I call intuitive musicians, okay? They sometimes think that they're bypassing all this heady stuff, and since they are, they don't have to think about it. But their playing still conforms to this order. When they try to produce beauty in music, when I say beauty, maybe I should extend that out. When they try to play something that's interesting, something that moves us, it doesn't have to be beautiful. They try to play something that moves us, it conforms, it has order, and they can't escape that order. And it points to that logos. And so that's why what I'm trying to say is I believe a good focus in life is if I pursue that beauty. And I say pursue beauty, I'm thinking like a romantic person of the romantic ages who, and it's kind of a romantic pursuit of God in a sense. I will find truth. And I'm trying to do that in music, as I just would play some notes and try to make them, ebb and flow and tug at our hearts, even if I'm oblivious to those systems. My music will conform to those systems. That circle, let's look at that handout with the circle. And we'll take a drink because I'm talking a lot. This is a neat little circle that musicians might be familiar with. And as I said, a lot of musicians don't know music theory. It's called the circle fifths. And it says all the letters in that circle are aligned in notes of 5. If you look at the C from the top, and I'll reference this like a clock. So the C is at noon, at 12 o'clock. And if you were to move counterclockwise, you're moving down 5 notes from C to F, okay? It's 5 letters back in the alphabet. And then F to D flat is another 5 letters down. If I go clockwise, I'm moving 5 letters up, okay? So it's either way, it's circle of fifths. It just depends if I want to move up or I want to down. And music follows this magical order. I think it looks magical to me. Where, those notes, and as you group them in fifths, they keep accumulating more, the keys keep accumulating more sharps and flats. And that's what the circle is used for. Primarily, it's to teach musicians how to memorize how many black keys are in a key. Like in the key of D major, there's 2 black keys, and there's 5 white keys. Now, what I want to show you with this circle is I'm going to play a chord progression that just moves through the circle, and I'm going to start from noon at C, and I'm going to move counterclockwise, and I'm going to take it all the way down to. I don't remember what I did with this. I was practicing this earlier. I think I take it all the way down to D flat, and I'm going to jump, and then from there I just jump to G because it sounded good to me. And you notice G is diagonal. See, there's a lot of neat little geometry, tricks that you can see and type of this. Music just follows this circle a lot of times. So just so you can hear the little chord progression. So here's the C, here's the F, B flat, E flat, and then the A flat, and then I think I said, is there a D flat right next to there, and then the G, and then I can start it over, go back to C, and I could start back through the circle if I wanted to. I could have kept going all the way around too, by the way. Maybe I should demonstrate that if I can. I'm putting myself on the spot, but starting from C, going counterclockwise, I'm going to try to go all the way around, and we got C, F, B flat, the E flat, whoops, that's a bad note, it's called a clunker, A flat, here's the D flat, here's the F sharp, B, E, A, and then D, G. As you can see that you could compose music from this. A lot of times what I was doing earlier when I was improvising was I was playing like 3 of those chord letters that are right next to each other. Like if you look at noon, you see the C, and then to its right you got the G, and to its left you got the F, C, G, and F, C, F, and G. That's 1, 4, 5 on that little chart I gave you with all the chords, and that would be C, F, and G. So a lot of times, a lot of pop songs, la 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 ba, wrong key, la 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 ba, right, and Hang On Sloopy, same thing, It's just using those 3 letters consecutively, going back and forth in a mind-numbing fashion. I emphasize mind-numbing. But music follows a pattern, and it's organized, and if I try to ignore the pattern, I can't. If I try to be oblivious to the theory, my music will still conform to it. Did anybody ever heard of John Cage? John Cage was a very interesting guy, and he certainly, I think of him as more of a music philosopher than anything. I think he saw that the world was random and a product of total chance, and he produced music that was more like that. It's like he was the type of guy who maybe produced, if you can call it music. By Edgar Varèse's standard, I'm not so sure if it's music because he says it's organized sound, but he would play music that he'd flip a coin, or he was using some type of cards, I thought, to produce numbers randomly, and then he would use those numbers to build songs. Check out YouTube and John Cage. He's very interesting. But he came from a perspective of trying to reduce music to take this order thing out of the picture. You can do that. You can take order out of the picture, or at least try to. I could, instead of playing the 7 notes, just say, I'm going to play 12 notes. Even 12 notes is a system, so I really can't escape the order. But this will sound less ordered than my 7-note thing did. I'm just going to play random stuff off of 12 notes, okay? sounds like somebody who can't play, right? It might work for atonal music, atonal jazz, okay? And there might be a place for that when you want to really kill somebody with dissonance, okay? Instead of killing somebody with kindness. But it generally doesn't move people. And the thing about John Cage's music that I think most people could agree with is his music didn't move people, okay? At least not in the way that, Chopin could move someone, okay? It was interesting, it was thought-provoking, but he tried to dispel or take out that order and chaos, and he really couldn't do it. And that's why I say that when you pursue beauty, or when you pursue things that are interesting, pursue things that are healthy for you, blessed, like Jesus used that term, you end up finding truth that comes along for the ride. My Christianity says that I need to give up myself, and that's very, very difficult for me to do. To be selfless, very difficult. And when I try to pour myself out to God, he surprises me and gives me myself back. That's why some say, I've heard it said that Christ did not simply come to save people, but he came to show us what it meant to be human. And he was maybe more human than anybody if what we Christians believe about him has any merit of truth. I'm getting to the end of my conversation. I want to give you guys some time, but I do want to talk to you about the fact that I'm a worship leader, okay? And one thing I believe, I love leading worship. I do it. Right now I'm in between churches, although I got a church that I'm courting about being a worship leader again. And in a lot of religion, I view, I really don't like religion. I don't like the term religion. I don't like the label. I look at it as man trying to reach up to God and to score points and to try to be a good person. Maybe, thank you, maybe so that they can just impress people or something. But I see worship as being purpose and being meaning. In the Old Testament, Genesis 22, Abraham was, he had to take an altar. He had to take a sacrifice, which was going to be a son, which was very interesting and controversial, and up to a mountain. And he had to go to a place that was outside of himself to worship. And then as you look at Jewish history, they later got the tabernacle, the synagogue, the temple, and then the synagogue. And they had a place to worship. In the New Testament, Jesus is standing in front of the temple, and he says something thought-provoking again, like he always does. He says, he's standing in front of the temple, and he says, tear this temple down, in 3 days I'll rise it back up. And people thought, who's this guy think he is? It took him 40 years to build this building. He wasn't talking about the building. He was talking about himself. Now, we Christians, therefore, believe that our body is the temple, and that means that church service is happening all the time. That means that I can't escape church service. That means I don't go to Sunday morning mass or church service or whatever you want to call it to worship, because worship is happening in my life 24/7. Now, the monks, they thought, the way they interpreted this was that you have to escape all the banal, trite things of life. You have to escape, today we had to stand in line at BMV, we had to mow our lawns. Those things distract us from worship, is how many people would see that. And they tried to escape from that and devote their lives either as a hermit or into a community so that they could devote themselves fully to prayer. And I've had to ask the question as a believer, if my body's the temple and the church service is always on, does every word have to, I'm trying to talk fast too, does every word have to be a prayer? Does every meal have to be a communion? Does every bath have to be a baptism? And the point is, I don't believe so, because what I see is that God didn't put all this stuff in life to nag away at me and to try to keep me away from worship, but worship's about purpose. And Jesus says that when he says, Matthew 6:33, seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and the rest of these things shall be added unto you. Give of yourself, and I'll give you yourself back. He says prioritize God first and make God the center of your life and make him the driving purpose of everything you do. When I play guitar, I'm giving this to God. This is not me. I don't want this. I don't want to tickle people's ears. I'm not interested in entertaining people. For that reason, I look at worship as a higher art form than anything that Elvis Presley or John Mayer or whoever is the latest flavor of the month or flavor of the year is doing out there. And I certainly respect professional musicians and would love to have such a vocation. So I feel like I get to lead people in purpose, in meaning. And I even believe that God's wired me to be purpose-driven as a result. I don't have all the answers. I sound like I do. I'm sorry. I don't mean that, okay? I always tell people I don't have all the answers. I just have many questions. Because one thing I've gotten pretty good at with that creative mindset, maybe being a musician, is learning how to question things. Okay, I'm definitely over time. I want to leave some time for Q&A. I'm told we have 15 minutes. If we can get out here at 10 till, that's great. Yes?
I would love to know, physiologically, what makes us get goosebumps at a concert. It could be a vocal concert, could be 4-part harmony, could be an orchestra. What makes that happen?
You're asking $1 million question I don't have an answer to either, you know. Except to say that I think, and this is oversimplified, this is God of the gaps, but I think God made us that way, and I think He did that for a reason. I believe He's designed us all for purpose, and there's certain frequencies that make things resonate. Okay, I have my guitars hang on the wall in my room, and I'll be playing one guitar, and certain overtones of a chord I play makes my acoustic guitar vibrate. And I believe that God's made the universe that way. He made us so we respond. Again, it's like what I said about narrative and how we respond to story, how when I played something and I was ignoring consonants and dissonance and it didn't make any sense and I was playing the notes randomly, it didn't move us. John Cage doesn't move us. But when I think in terms of story, it moves us. Well, that might be because there's a personal God. See, I don't just believe in a God. It's one thing to believe in God. I believe in God because I said music is ordered, right? I've never seen ordered birth without intelligence. You cannot look at a computer and look at the binary, or you can look at the machine language and the programming and say that didn't come from an intelligent being. If the computers ever develop sentience, if they ever become consciously aware and they analyze themselves, you can see that they can make the mistake that we human beings make, and they can say, we're ordered. We must be projecting that order. We probably they could see things like Immanuel Kant or David Hume, I think, who thought that we simply project order and there's really no order in the universe. I believe that order is external to us. I can't prove it, but that's the philosophy of being a realist. And I believe that this God has created us to recognize that order and to respond to that because He wants us to enter into a relationship. I know that is a huge claim. And I'm not one to sit here and tell you I have a hot number to God where I pick up my bat phone and I talk to Him all the time, and I hear Him back. I'm not here to claim that, but I try to pursue that, and I find the most health, the most contentment. I'm the richest man as I do that successfully, and I'm the poorest man when I fail. It's the best answer I can come up with, and that's not much. Good question. Thank you, Judy. By the way, people think music's mathematical. I think it's math-like. There's no Boolean, there's no operations. You know, math has addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. You don't have to do those things to be a musician, ever. All I have to do is count. Anybody can count. So that's why I say it's math-like, but you don't necessarily have to use math to play music, you know. Any other questions? Well, I want to thank you guys for listening, and thank you for staying awake. Thank you for not running off like my playing must have repelled some people. It's all cool. I believe it. Thank you. I enjoyed it. Thanks again, Dan, for letting me come.